It has to be said that Harry Littman is, as we say in the internet streaming game, I guess, a gentleman scholar. He's a person whose background is in lines up nicely with the era. He's an educated person, and so to hear him talk about things like Republicans purging voter voter polls, you might think he's talking about like the 1920s, like Jim Crow era stuff. I want to be perfectly clear. This is today. You should check and make sure you're registered to vote today, because Republicans are pulling this bullshit right now.
Hey everyone, Harry here to talk about a pretty important story that has escaped notice in the tsunami of political news with Super Tuesday. But the New York Times has a long piece and did some excellent reporting about a fledgling but ambitious effort by MAGA Republicans, and a central figure here is Cleta Mitchell. You may remember her from, a former Trump lawyer who was involved in all kinds of nefarious misdeeds, was on the call with Brad Raffensperger, had to resign.
Cleta Mitchell, yeah. I just gonna say understatement of the century.
From her firm. Anyway, she, among others, has
nefarious but burgeoning, I think.
Started it's got a clever name of Check My Vote. Sorry about that. But it's a programmatic effort with, organized blueprints, basically to try to target Democratic strongholds and pare down the eligible voters. And
just listen to that. The name of the program, whose goal, I want to point out, the goal of the program is to purge voters. The goal is not to purge illegitimate voters. None of the crap they always say they're doing. The goal, as it always is, as we have had confirmed many times over, as has been vomited out of the mouths of Republicans, the goal is always to purge legitimate votes for the party they don't want to win. And they call that Check My Vote. Maddening. Not even, yeah. I had not heard the name of the program before now.
And do so with really strong arm tactics on, small time election officials in mainly suburbs of big Democratic stronghold cities. So the same sorts of people we saw Rudy Giuliani and others browbeating in Georgia. That's their quarry here. So they are basically alleging, by the use of different sort of software, that Democratic voting rolls have been illegally expanded in different ways, but the main way being that registrations occurring in different jurisdictions. And so, a voter who registers then moves and registers again, except it turns out, no surprise, to be mostly 100% bullshit. So that this was all happening very quietly on purpose. And there is a suburb of Detroit where they were able to skim the voting rolls by about 100 people. And until the New York Times got wind of this and brought it to the attention of the local authorities, and turned out to be bogus. Those voters have now been reinstated, so that's a small victory for voting rights, but it's part of a big operation that is just kind of flexing its muscles and getting going. And so, and even when they make false allegations and it's discovered, there can still be consequences for individual voters. It can affect one if you've had these sorts of temporary purging from the rolls. It can affect your ability to vote by mail.
So just to be clear, absolutely clear, they look for areas that are likely Democrat leaning, and they attack our voting rights. They claim a crime in the hopes that they'll be able to get away with an assault on our voting rights. Not unlike, for example, a racist walking down a park, seeing a black person they disagree with over something, and deciding, you know what I'm going to do? Instead of just having a regular argument like a gentleman, what I'm going to do is pretend that a crime has happened and call the cops and get them to try to kill this person for me, because I am the lowest type of human that exists. You know, when that happens, pretending there's a crime so that they themselves can get away with a crime. That's what this is. It's their excuse to order up a state crime like a pizza. There lies a problem here that we must address that has never been addressed before. This has been dealt with before. The problem is they are allowed to keep doing. They do it knowingly. They do it in a way that is, I feel, provable. As in, provable in a court of law. This has happened many, many times in the past, going all the way back to Jim Crow times. That before this. This is just like the common way to be corrupt in America. And conservatives, regardless of the party they're part of, conservatives are the ones that do it. Because if you're a conservative in America, you want to go back to worse times. Worse times were better for you because you're a bad person, generally speaking. So, what happens is we double check, and the left-leaning voter puts in the extra work, as always, to ensure that their rights are not taken away, and we survive. We have to do that part again right now. We have to do that part, the same old part, again now. We have to beat them in the old way again now. What should change? And can only change if we first beat them again in the old way. Is that criminal charges should be pursued for this. We have, in the form of Fani Willis, this gal, template for pursuing that. This is a RICO case. A group, in an organized manner, tried to defraud us. They tried to nullify our votes. This is a RICO case. I don't care if the government, well, I would care, but I would prefer the government charge the case and lose 12 times than not charge any case at all. This was an organized assault on our rights, and there cannot be no reaction. In fact, there has been no reaction, and what you get is a coup. It always leads to that eventually. We're there now. So the response needs to exist. Not it needs to be improved. It needs to exist. Thus far in history, our only response has been check, make sure you're registered. What Republicans would love for us to do is to say, oh, they won't go after them criminally. Why even bother? Well, the reason you even bother is because they are trying to get you to not vote. You knucklehead. Vote. Do the thing they don't want you to do. It's literally that simple. But it is not enough to just say, whew, saved ourselves again, just barely. Let's take no precautions. Let's not answer that injustice. Let's just let them get away with it. That's not acceptable. Back to Harry. But bear that in mind. This is, by the way, why you should check who your local prosecutor is. Make sure that's a lefty. They exist. This gal right here, if I read that book correctly, was one of several, frankly, rather centrist Dems in that race for Fulton County DA, district attorney. If you were following her race at the time, I suspect you would not be terribly thrilled with Fawny Willis, and you'd be right to be not terribly thrilled with Fawny Willis. Doing a hell of a job now. Doesn't mean you shows what you know, nothing. It just means that having a Democrat in a position of power matters. The difference between a Democrat and Republican is as huge as the difference between a progressive and a Democrat. The best thing to have in a position of power is a progressive. Make no mistake. But doesn't mean we don't learn lessons from people who do a good job, no matter where they come from. Fawny Willis, that's one of them. We now have a template for prosecuting these crimes, and they are crimes. It's a RICO case, especially if it happens in Georgia. But boy, I got to tell you, going all the way up the chain, Merrick Garland, this seems like an organized conspiracy nationwide to deny votes of U.S. citizens. That needs to be addressed. I realize there are laws that say, oh, well, you're not supposed to do that. Oh, well, if we bring this up to the Supreme Court, let's find out how they'll phrase. No. There are simpler, more to the point laws that deal with this, and the fact that they haven't been pursued in the past lies solely on the fact that the people in charge of pursuing them have no interest in that, because they are, generally speaking, Republican. I cannot think of a non-Republican attorney general that has ever, let me just check my notes, existed. And we haven't put pressure on them. What's changed? We're going to put pressure on them. But first and foremost, you can check that you're registered to vote.
It can require you to make certain showings on election day and the like. And of course, that's exactly the notion. It's just a kind of a newly minted for 2024 way to go around and try to reduce Democratic voters, or if nothing else, kind of set the stage for a post election challenge, and say we have, as happened in 2020, these all kinds of voters who shouldn't have been there, etc., and all focused on especially Democratic suburban strongholds in, of course, and it's the thing to remember for the election again and again, including when you see these lugubrious national polls, in the 6 states that are going to decide the election no matter what, and usually in little subdivisions of those states. So they are very carefully targeting those, and it's got a sort of pseudo official kind of approach where they've in the county in Waterford County outside of Detroit, they basically browbeat the clerks and told them you have to do to purge these people from the rolls, or you are breaking the law. We're talking about mild mannered, often sort of senior citizens who do their patriotic duty, God bless them, for the country in elections, who are now, being faced down by the MAGA machine to try to strip Democratic voters only from the polls, or at least lay the groundwork for challenging them later. So kudos to the New York Times for having uncovered. It's a big piece, like 10 pages long, a big piece in the Times, and it's clear that it's a much bigger operation with the organization of some really questionable customers like Cleta Mitchell. And, there's nothing illegal about going around and trying to make bullshit claims.
Oh, not so.
But when you have cowed election officials and you're only going one side, actually, I shouldn't say that. It is illegal if you're making false claims, if you're essentially defrauding, and that may be what's happening.
I'm glad he said it, because he's a smarter man than me, and I was going to jump on that. So, here's something about the law, which, as a layman who has been in a lot of courtrooms for don't worry about it, I've noticed. Oftentimes, broad notions of right and wrong can be expressed in legal terms, and people in very safe rooms with a good bit of distance between them and consequences will casually say, well, the letter of the law says that no rules have been violated here, even when something feels really wrong. But then, miraculously, a court case will come up, and somebody who's just got a big old paycheck will have found a way to phrase what that feeling in your gut was that told you it was wrong in legal terms. If, for example, you were just now sitting there thinking what Cleta Mitchell was doing seemed super immoral and super dishonest and would have had negative consequences for a whole lot of voters, is there really no law that says you can't do that? That you'll find there is. And I think if you think about it in simple terms, then you'll be able to phrase it in such a way that you can ask, what is the law that was violated here? For example, if you are knowingly, and that's key, that's what makes it difficult, but if you are knowingly looking to purge people from voter rolls, specific kinds of voters, if that's your intention, is that allowed? The answer is no, the law does not allow for that. That's a violation. And you got to find out who's in charge of enforcing that law. I'm going to let him wrap it up. Now, I understand there's a difficulty in proving how knowing it was, but I also want to point out these piggies have had no natural predators for a long time. They've had no resistance, so they are not used to covering their tracks. They don't have a lot of skills developed at all. So it would not surprise me if there was a recorded conversation somewhere of Cleta Mitchell and who knows who else saying we need to get less Democrats on the polls. What can we do about it? I know. Let's pretend like we found problems in heavily Democratic areas. If that's found, guess what? Rico.
Here, but the bigger problem is that they're getting, clerks who don't really know any better to, meekly acquiesce to these, aggressive insistence that voters have to be pared back. And once that happens, this is sort of general fact of life in election law. It's just hard to undo in time. So if they're able to do this, they're going to identify voters who you can just bet are going to have disproportionate share of problems on election day. So this is one thing that just happened to come out. It's something new. We actually found out just today, or in the last couple of days, in a settlement in Wisconsin about good old Ken Chesbro and how the big ticket plan for 2020 of false electors actually was initiated well before people, basically just after the election, and he was a clear architect of it, not someone who was just spitballing, as he's put it, and putting out legal theories. He was all in, including at January 6th itself with a
Interesting, but off topic. So the point being, they're trying to purge Democrats from the polls. Oh, Pixel Jake shining through there. Yikes. They're trying to purge Democrats. Make sure they didn't purge you. Go check. Check that you're still registered. It's been a quiet effort, so they want to sneakily get away with that. The follow-up to this is going to be that we insist it be charged, because these punks have been allowed to play games with democracy for entirely too long. It's a shame that our Department of Justice allows it. Really means it's not our Department of Justice then. So let's take it. Let's ensure that we are not purged. Let's ensure that our votes are of use and we get a lot of political support, particularly in the House and Senate. But I want to see local prosecutors ready to rock on this case. The better we do in that regard, the easier the fight will be. But even if the whole world is against us, we're still going to have this fight. I don't care how hard it is, because we're not in the era anymore where we let these things slide. Somebody just attacked democracy again. We attack back. We're tossing them in a courtroom to explain themselves. I saw fantastic comments. I want to get to them. Let's go.